cow pasture we played in. Base here, tree there, whatever. That's what we made bases out of. Second base, we only had bags, to lay down. But first base was a tree. If that ball went up in the tree, we caught it coming out there.
And when I was a kid, I would get up in the morning, go up to the playground. I'd be there all day. I wanted to be around the game. I wanted to play.
Well, growing up in Harrisburg, I heard the old men talking about baseball. They would talk about Babe Ruth. They would talk about the Negro Leagues. They would talk about Josh Gibson.
We could not play it on the same field that they played it on. That's how tough it was. I could tell you stories you never heard of.
The Philadelphia Pythians, a black team in Philadelphia, had sent representatives up to this meeting, and they were going to attempt to join the Pennsylvania League. And that's where that's considered maybe the first time where they're putting a ban on blacks playing baseball.
The 1867 conference, they didn't stop it unwritten. They actually codified that if you had a roster with, I think it said more than one, so they were absolutely and in writing segregating baseball in Harrisburg. Frank Grant's a Hall of Famer, Major League Hall of Famer. He plays in 1890 on Harrisburg right here, and one of his teammates, that I just mentioned, Huey Jennings, also became a Hall of Famer through his Major League career. And that's the first instance. You usually think of Pee Wee Reese and Jackie Robinson when you're thinking of black and white early teammates that go on to the Hall of Fame. But 60 years before them, or 57, in 1890, you had Huey Jennings and Frank Grant on the same team. Frank Grant black, Huey Jennings white, that go on to the Hall of Fame.
The Harrisburg Giants started around 1890 by Colonel Struthers. Initially, his team was of local ball players, but in the 1920s, as he started making money, then he went out and he purchased players such as Oscar Charleston and Dixon and Fats Jenkins and so forth. Oscar Charleston, of course, is in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Fats Jenkins is in the Basketball Hall of Fame. And Rap Dixon, the third person, was an outstanding player whose worth is just starting to be measured. Actually, I think he set a record, a Negro League record that was also better than the Major League records of something like 14 or 15 consecutive hits. So these three players are considered possibly the greatest outfield of all time anywhere. Of course, we had teams that had one or two great outfielders at one time. But this team from 1924 through 1928 in Harrisburg was one of the great outfields of all time.
Throughout their period of 24 through 27 in the Eastern Colored League, they did have the second best record in that league behind Hilldale. So Harrisburg never won the pennant, but they did have the second best cumulative record, and they had a lineup that included two Hall of Famers, Oscar Charleston and Ben Taylor, not to mention the basketball, Fats Jenkins. But they also had another hitter who's the most deserving Harrisburg Giant, in my opinion, as much as I love Rat Dixon, John Beckwith, the Black Bomber. This guy was a hitter, and Whenever the black teams were playing exhibition games against white teams or anybody else, the two players they tried to get in terms of picking up were Oscar Charleston and John Beckwith. And Colonel Struthers had both on his regular payroll.
There was also contests in the 1920s between the Harrisburg Giants and the Harrisburg Senators played for the city championship. And usually the Giants won.
When I played for the Army team, you know what I mean? See, I was in Texas, Oklahoma, Mississippi. We played like we went to Alabama to play. Man, that was terrible. Because when you went through the city, they pulled down the curtains. You couldn't see nothing. And then when you were sitting in the seat, the white was sitting over here, and the Negro was sitting back here, and they had towels across it. Yeah, on a coach, on the train. They had towels across, and you couldn't go above there and sit. You know what I mean? Yeah, that was in Alabama. Going to Alabama, I don't never want to go to Alabama no more. But when I come out of the Army, I had to play softball because I wasn't allowed to play baseball because Harrisburg was bad, man.
The 1954 team advertises in the paper for an open tryout, and I have no idea the makeup of the tryout except to say that, I would say 30% of the team is white. This isn't just one or two or even four. There's serious representation on this team, which plays in a league, the Eastern Negro League. This was an integrated team in '54.
The Harrisburg Giants was the only team in the Eastern League was integrated. And we didn't get that because you was white. You got it because you could play baseball.
I saw it was in the sports section. I saw an article that stated that the Giants were going to have tryouts. So I called Bruno. I said, "Let's go and try out." He said, "Well, that's a Negro League." I said, "So what?" I said, "If they don't want us, they'll tell us, go home." So we went over. We were trying out over on the island, and we came in, said who we talked to, and Tommy Raines was the manager. We went over and talked to him, and he said, "Fine, try out," and the rest is history.
They never questioned it. That was on our roster. I guess they said it was our business because we never had no problems.
It was only the Harrisburg Giants. The man that owned them, the guy that stand up there, he owned a big hotel, right? And he was tough. You know what I mean? Because in the first place, he was like this. If you was white and could play, you could play. If you was white and could not play good like he wanted you to play, you didn't play. You didn't play for the Harrisburg Giants.
I had read about the Negro Leagues and seen different things that were going on there and everything. And so I guess I had curiosity about it, and I figured it would be a little bit better baseball, so I wanted to see if I was good enough to play at that level.
One of their early practices is on the very day that Brown v. Board is announced. The Supreme Court announces the rule that changes Plessy versus Ferguson, which significantly affected baseball. 125 black players in the 19th century, all of a sudden are down to zero. So in '54, when the integrated Harrisburg Giants are forming, you have the landmark Supreme Court decision being announced on the same day as they're practicing.
Well, Harrisburg was starting to desegregate. They had the high schools were never segregated, but they still had segregated elementary schools up until about 1952, 53, just about these years.
We didn't fight each other. Everybody liked each other, you know what I mean? They got guys, Harrisburg Giants, like the guys, some guys don't, you and I not big, but some guys don't like other guys on the team right today. You know what I mean? It wasn't like that then. When we played, everybody was liked each other. You know what I mean? We didn't discriminate between you or him because you didn't like it because I didn't like it. No, it wasn't like that.
And we didn't know until other, players talked to us, but we didn't notice any animosity or any backlash because we were there. And they accepted us, and they said, if you can play baseball, you can play. That's all they wanted was baseball players. They didn't care whether you were black or white. That's all they wanted.
They were at the forefront before the Detroit Tigers, the Philadelphia Phillies, the New York Yankees, although the Yankees had blacks in their system at the time. They had none on the Yankees. And the Boston Red Sox, of course. The Harrisburg Giants are integrated in playing quality baseball 5 years before the Boston Red Sox integrated. So that's the significance of the team, and it's something that I don't think has been properly mined.
I'm not sure if it was another team, but I do remember the article, or the time that it happened. And I guess they had come to the game, figuring it was going to be all Negro players. And when they saw us, they said, what are you guys doing here? And that's when Sykes stepped in and said, we wanted them here. That's why they're here. And they just backed away and said, okay, and that was it. There was nothing that ever came from it. But there was the case of the blacks defending the white, a reversal of what they had been going through. So, that was, when I was that young, I didn't know exactly what was going on. As I grew older, I started remembering all these things, and I'm thinking, geez, that was pretty monumental in my life, and I didn't realize it at the time.
This was my first big racial experience, and it was a good one. So it helped me to live my life as I did. I'm proud of meeting these guys, because they helped my relationship grow. Really take off, because things I ran into didn't frighten me like it used to as a kid.
So Jim also is a pioneer. Before the Harrisburg Giants probably wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for guys like Whedon and played in the white leagues and started that ball rolling.
Because the first team that I played with a Benbrook citizen, and they said, you ain't gonna make the team because you ain't the right color. I said, I'm going out and try it anyway. I don't they were on that team. Yeah. And then from that on, then the other colored ball players got in the city league. I had a lot of friends on that team before I even played for them. See, when I went to play for Stephen, we were playing for Stephen Giants. And Pembroke was one of the teams in the county that we played against. So a lot of guys on the team that I played with was friends of mine. And they was white, you know what I mean?
As I look back on it, I always thought, I didn't at that time, but as I look back, I always thought that they had struggled so much to get acceptance. And maybe that's why they accepted us so easily. Because they knew what it was like, only it was reversed with us. And nobody ever gave us a bad time or nothing. So maybe that's what it was. I don't know, but like I said, in retrospect, I often think of maybe that didn't have something to do with it.
We were in Syracuse, New York, with the Harrisburg Giants. And we went to this big hotel on the corner in Syracuse, New York. Now, and this had to be in the late 40s, I guess, because we were finished by the 60s. But anyway, we were at this hotel. I wish I could remember the name of the hotel. Big hotel. And we couldn't get rooms in Syracuse, New York. No. Can you believe that? In the 40s, during the war, you know. So we had to leave that, head for the Black Belt, and we stayed at a place called Pullman Porters Club. That's where we got rooms. Yeah. You know, you'd be surprised, young guys like you know, how did those things happen, you know? But they do. They did, you know. So, in my estimation, because I'm pretty old, we came a long way. And I know we got a long way to go, but I appreciate how far we came. See, I can appreciate it, you know. But it's tough.
It was tough then.
Tough road to hoe. But, well, does it answer your question?